Now let's get into the topic of the greatest myth of all, this myth of humanity. I'm gonna quote it. I think I've quoted him before, but I'm gonna quote him one more time because I think this is a nice quote. I like it, by Goethe, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. He asks, mankind, it is an abstraction. There are, always have been, and always will be men, and only men. Now, why do we believe in humanity? Well, it's the all-leveling concept again. Once you eradicate somebody's identification markers, his identification with his sex, with his race, with his heritage, you take away his culture, then what is he left with? In order to control the masses and integrate them into cohesive groups, then you have to give them a shared identity. And what's the lowest common denominator that we all share? It's a shared biology. Now, all species biology is based on a reproductive goal. That is, we're called human because we have the ability to use each other to produce copies of each other. That is the only reason we're called human. And through the ages, we've grown dependent on one another for survival, taking advantage of the herding methods of survival, which make predation more difficult, which offer sheltering to the individual within numbers, which takes advantage of synergy, which later on develops into specialized behavior. I mean, from specialized sexual roles, eventually we get specialized social roles. We have the doctors, the mechanics, the scientists, the cooks, who know a lot about one subject and are completely dependent on others on every other matter. I've written about this somewhere else, that specialization creates a kind of autism where the mind is focused exclusively on one discipline and has no ability anywhere else. I mean, some people would know this as the nerd effect, the geek, who is a genius in one subject and totally inept in everything else. So herd psychology creates a codependence, which we recognize in ourselves. So humanity, it's a genetic relationship, shared genes, but of course we share genes with many species. So what is it that unites us into one species? Again, it's our ability to use each other for reproductive means. Now some are finally discovering that this unity of human is a false one, it's a fake one. There is no united humanity. We're all different. In fact, in order to unite us, this common denominator has to be found. And if you follow through the logic, then sometimes it reaches extremes that become ridiculous. Now, there's even talk about speciesism, where we can't even be discriminatory towards animals because they too are alive. Maybe later we'll think it's evil to consider plants to be inferior to us. I don't know. I mean, if you follow this logic down, it reaches I mean, that's what nihilism is. It's the leveling of everything into nondescript paste. Well, nothing is allowed to distinguish an individual except his service to the whole. And this is the key factor, because we see it in all structures, in all modern structures, where it's the production and the consumption of the individual that is valued. It's what he gives back, and of course we're trained to always contribute. This is our value system. In order to feel valuable about ourselves, we have to contribute, and not only just to specific groups, to select groups, because then we're prejudiced and bigots, but to humanity in whole. So we can see the selfishness involved here. And some people are awakening to this fact that we're selfish organisms. We're looking after ourselves. Even when we're claiming to be selfless, we're really taking care of ourselves. Take, for example, these MRAs now that are crying about man, the state of man today. They're using the concept of man as a unity to project upon them their own feelings. So they feel like victims, they feel wronged, they feel ashamed. So they project upon this artificial unity, which they call man, all those fears and hopes. When they say, I want to help men, they mean I want to help me. And I'm going to use men as a vehicle for helping me. But they won't admit that because it goes against the modern morals. And they cannot go against the modern morals, either because of peer pressure, or because they feel ashamed, or because they can't think outside the common ideals and the common myths. They've been so indoctrinated and stunted intellectually that they can't think outside the box. In order to say something at all, you have to make it seem like you're trying to help somebody, or else you're not allowed, because that would be egotistical, of course. So in order to say something that is for you, something beneficial, you have to mask it in this altruism. Everything has to become altruistic. Everything has to benefit somebody else. So this myth of humanity has grown over the years, and now it's crumbling. All of a sudden we see that women are men and men are different. They use different tactics to attain their goals. Women use more slide tactics, more indirect tactics, because due to their specialized role as females, they are not as powerful or not as smart. Well, smart in the abstract sense. They can't think abstractly like men can. So they have to use their charisma, their sexuality. In fact, sex is the only source of power for women. They have to use men as vehicles to attain power, whereas men attain power directly. They use men as vehicles. And of course we see this now in this modern age, men doing the same thing. They're using other men as a vehicle of attaining their power, because they can't stand up and say, I'm a man, this is what I want, and this is what I believe. So they have to always cover it up through otherness, through the other. So of course this concept of humanity is rooted in this myth of absolute similarity. In fact, evolution tells us that what is reproduced, what is selected through natural selection, is what is different. It's what's different that is selected. If we're all similar, then what the hell are we fighting over, right? What are women choosing mates for? Then everybody would be just as viable a mate as anybody else. So why are we selecting? We're selecting what we consider the more superior, what is more fit for any given environment. So the myth of a common uniform gene is that it's a myth. Of course, this myth has morphed into a meme, an idea, and that's has transpired into these myths, these liberal myths about a uniform moral system, or uniform ideals, or uniform value systems. And of course it's all bullshit. It focuses on the similarity in order to avoid the differences, because of course focusing on differences is wrong, it's evil, it's discriminating. So what's going on right now? What is it based on? Well, in the past, in more primitive environments, a species grouped together because there was a common threat. I mean, that's what the binding mechanism starts as a reaction to a common threat. But as humans began to dominate the environment, this threat became less and less. Of course, there's still diseases, but there's no predator that we fear. We have technologies that can take care of pretty much any other creature. So the threat is becoming less and less. So what exactly is keeping us together now? Now what's keeping us together is a shared indoctrination, a shared brainwashing. We're told that we're one humanity, divided into different nations. Well, it begins as a nation, right? From a common tribe comes a common unity of a city-state, and from a city-state comes a nation-state, and now it's becoming a super nation-state. And each one demands a more and more extreme violence on the individual. The individual has to be leveled down, kept from being more selective with what and who he considers his own kind. But there's also a backlash. So now we see like-minded people grouping together in what I call mimetic groups, right? Shared interests, shared goals, shared awareness, shared intellectual levels, shared physical beauty levels, whatever. It could be anything. So we're fragmenting. As the system is promoting uniformity, we're fragmenting on a mimetic level, and this is happening on a clandestine level too, because we're not permitted to express a lot of this selectiveness. So a lot of us keep it secret, but it happens naturally. We birds of a feather group together, and we see this online. People that have the same values and the same principles and the same ideas congregate in the same areas, and we see this on the internet with the men's movement now. Men that have suddenly awoken to the fact that they're getting screwed, and that the freedom of women has resulted in them getting screwed, even though before they were promoting liberty and freedom for all, and now still resisting the idea that without state control, as they call it, without an authority, a paternalistic authority, the animal and human beings will revert back to anarchy. I mean, when you take away law and order, what happens in the streets? People go out looting and breaking things. That's because most people are only pretending to be civilized. It's under threat that they remain disciplined to the rules. There's very few people that are actually compassionate and innately good, you will call it, or innately rational in their behavior. And I can sympathize with a lot of these men who have been hurt by women and who find women to be disgusting today, because I agree with them. What I don't agree with is this community of men bullshit. Not all men are my brothers. Most men are despicable themselves. If women are so different to men, then one man is different to another man as well. Do we have a common goal? Well, I don't know. My goal is to harvest resources, and women are a resource. But then again, so are men. Men are also a resource for me. If I have a friend, then he's somebody who I share interests with or methods with, and who I ally with in order to achieve a goal. And that's from a rational point of view, not an emotive point of view. I'm not going to inject emotion in, although it does participate. You grow attached to the person, of course, who shares your interests and your principles. But I don't let it cloud my reasoning. I know that a friendship is based on common goals, common interests, common states, common awareness. And this might change because people change. So that's why friendships break apart. So I'm not a great fan of this idea of a unified mankind, that we're like men fighting against women. Or, I mean, it's good that men are suddenly realizing that, sex isn't that important. And if men are controlled by their sexual urges, then they should face the music. If pussy is that important to them, then they should pay the piper. Why would I care? If somebody's so base and so stupid, why would I give a shit? And how naive would I be thinking that I could change them, or I could make him like me? Or would I even want them to be like me? I'm only interested in my own kind. And what are my own kind? Outside my family, my bloodline, it's people I share a mimetic foundation with. I share the same principles, the same goals, the same worldview, the same perceptions, same ideals. That means I'm more discriminating, not less. I don't just judge myself as being a man, because man is a very base category. If I say, and this is what's ridiculous about the feminist movement as well, they claim that they're equal, the same as men, and yet they still retain the title of woman. Well, the same goes for these MRAs. If you're claiming that women are irrelevant and sex is not that important, then why do you retain the title man? Man is associated with the procreation practice. Once you call yourself a man, then you're accepting that as a principle of your being. Now, I accept procreation as a principle of my being because I'm mortal. But a lot of you have ridiculed procreation, sour graping it. So therefore, why are you retaining the title man? Why you even call yourself MRAs? Why don't you just call yourselves, I don't know, asexual group? Then you can say that you don't even accept the title of man that's associated with the pursuit of females, the competition over females. If you're honest about your principles, then why don't you follow through with their logic? Why do you keep the title man? I, for one, don't believe in a brotherhood of man or a brotherhood of humanity. I believe that the more aware a person is, the more discriminating he is about who he calls his friend and who he calls his own kind. If you're a simpleton, then you might say, oh, I'm human, because there's nothing else about you that's distinguished. If you're a little more complex, then you might call yourself a man. If you're even more so, then you might say I'm a communist, a fascist, a Nazi. So the more discriminating, the more precise you become with your self-identification, the more aware you are of differences, not similarities, of differences. And you start using these differences as a way of identifying yourself within the masses. Now, for me, memes are becoming far more important than genes. Like I said, there's just too many people in the world, and it's become too easy to reproduce. So the concept of sharing the genes and protecting our survival in the cosmos has lost its luster. Now we're talking about protecting ideas, preventing them from vanishing from the earth, from being leveled down to nothing. And we see this nihilistic trend happening, where everything is reduced to a simple idea, so everything can be united under it, under its premises. The most prevalent, of course, is the concept of human. And of course, once you accept that concept, then you should love every single man out there. You should love every woman as if they were your brother and sister. That means your love is worthless. Since all deserve your love, then it's worthless. Since all deserve your friendship, then what value does your friendship have? But I like these methods of using altruism to mask your own selfishness. It's a very fascinating phenomenon. For instance, one person on the internet claims to be, and I mean, revolutionaries throughout times have done the same thing. You know, communists used to say they were interested in the liberation of the working class, and now he's saying he's interested in the liberation of men. Now, for me, if a man is stupid enough to still believe the shit that he's trying to enlighten them upon, then he deserves everything he gets. Why would I want to save a weaker person from his own fate? Why would I protect the natural process of culling and facing the repercussions of your being, of your essence, of your actions? Why would I prevent that? In doing so, would I not propagate this weakness? I think so. Is it because this person is trying to project upon them his own feebleness when he says, I want to help these poor saps, these romantics? Is he not talking to himself indirectly through them? Is he not addressing himself to these people? To himself, I mean, through these people? Through a reflective action? He's saying the same thing as Christians, you know? They say when they show compassion towards somebody, it's really towards themselves that they're showing compassion. They're putting themselves in that person's position. They're saying, if I'm ever in that position, I want to be helped. So it's themselves that they're doing it for, not the other. But why would he want to save all of mankind? All of mankind? Or why would I want to save all of humanity? Most of humanity is filth. I think most of humanity should perish. There's just too many have been birthed already, and they're just polluting everything. I mean, we all know about the normal material pollution. What about genetic pollution? You know, every Tom, Dick, and Harry can have 10 kids now. You know, every idiot can have 10 kids. In fact, the stupider, the simpler a person is, the more kids he does have. Again, this is quantity over quality. Why would I want to contribute to this? Why would I want to help men have kids if they can't have kids on their own? If they can't find a strategy to achieve the goal of having a child, if that's what they want, why would I help them accomplish it? Why would I want to shame women, or do I even think that it's possible? Whoever denies that women have a nature really doesn't understand the evolutionary history or evolution, period. A woman is not only her uterus, her breast, her vagina. The specialized role the female plays in nature, the fact that she has to endure the presence of a bigger, stronger entity, a male, endure his penetration, endure his sperm inside of her for 9 months, in the case of humans, then endure the presence of a needy offspring that she has to wean and take care of at the risk of her life. All this necessitates a certain kind of psychology, and nature imbued this psychology in females, the same way it imbued males with the psychology of being challenging towards authority, of wanting to prove themselves, of being competitive, of thinking outside the box. This doesn't happen accidentally. And when I talk about nature, I'm not talking about anything abstract. For me, nature is the sum of all nurturing. When I say my nature, I mean every single event that contributed to my being, that shaped my being, that manifested in my being. This is my nature. Now, liberals would say that nurture can overcome this. Look, a generation of proper, quote-unquote, nurturing can overcome centuries of nature, centuries of nurturing. That's their mantra. That's like saying that I can heal a dog from being a dog by proper training. Is the dog transformed in my training, or does it act as if it's transformed? And I'll give you an example when it comes to humans. When we teach humans how to behave in a certain way, does this behavior alter their nature? Or are they just mimicking it because they think that's what is expected of them? And at the first opportunity, when they don't have to mimic imitate this behavior? Do they not revert back to their more primal, their more authentic self, to their natures? I mean, we see this every day in riots. We see it. We see it in women when they're released from the bonds of culture. How they revert back to their primal natures and they start behaving as females were intended to behave in nature. This is the contradiction between meme and gene. A lot of people are surprised by that. Like, I think they're so naive that they think that man somehow is pristine and good in his heart, and it's culture that corrupts him, and that with the proper training he's transformed somehow. That's not true. You can't change centuries of millennia of genetics with proper training. You can only train with a threat and reward mechanism. You can train an animal to behave a certain way. You can train a dog to behave like a cat. You can train a cat to behave like a dog. You can transform the species? No, you don't. You just train them to behave a certain way in your presence and under your authority. So women have been pretending to be something that they're not. It's now where they're being liberated from this pretense, from having to go through the middleman, that you see the real nature. And the same goes with men. Men are not excluded from this. Take man out of law and order premises and see what happens. So this concept of humanity is baffling to me. Actually, it's not baffling, but it's a little frustrating when I hear it being repeated by people who have no fucking clue what's going on. I don't believe in humanity. I don't belong to this concept of humanity. If anything, if this is what man is, then I'm a misanthrope. I'm an elitist. I'm going to be clear about this. I believe in aristocracy, and not in the way most people, because I know people are going to react to this word the way people react to the word Hitler or Nazi or whatever. I believe in the primacy of taste. I believe certain people are born with a certain level of awareness that exceeds the norm, and that these people are innately rational, that they only behave rationally. And what does that mean? That means they don't hurt others just for the sake of hurting or for no reason at all. That they could hurt somebody or they could not hurt somebody, but they need a rational reason to act. For me, that is the essence of being good, or that is the essence of my values. Not a moral standard that permits something or does not permit something just because, or just because there's a God who says so, or just because there's somebody who tells me that it's right or wrong, but on the premises, is it rational or is it irrational? Does it benefit me, or does the cost exceed the benefit or the potential benefit? And this is the this is the difference between agape and eros. You know, eros is all madness, it's all feeling, it's all irrational. Agape is based on a rational assessment of the other, loyalty towards a common goal, common principles, a common cost-benefit analysis. That's all it is. And you can feel the emotions afterwards as a camaraderie derived through this commonality. So I don't believe in humanity, this wanting to help human beings, you know, sheltering people that should not be sheltered, or perpetuating weakness just because of a moral code. I don't share the morals of the masses. I don't give a shit about the masses. I don't care about the idiot next door. If he's an idiot, he's not me. He's not my kind. I have no interest in his well-being. If he wants to commit suicide, then who the fuck cares? Weakness should commit suicide. It'll clean the earth. If somebody can't take reality, he's too weak to cope with the world, then why would I save him from that? There's just too much sheltering to begin with. Some of the problems that we get, not only the health department, but everywhere, in psychology, psychologically, this alienation is derived from this sheltering. People are from a young age are raised to think that they deserve something, that love is going to be there. If they try hard enough, they're going to accomplish anything, that they should have this and they should have that. They all become like little princesses and little princes. And then they grow up and they realize the world doesn't know them nothing. They doesn't give a shit. And that hits them like a brick of walls. Some of them can't take it. Some of them commit suicide. Some of them adapt. What did Nietzsche said? What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Or what doesn't kill me can only serve to make me stronger, to be more precise. Now, a lot of people might call me a fascist, a skinhead, or whatever. That doesn't matter to me. For me, my love and my compassion is more selective. I choose to give it where I think it'll actually accomplish something. I want to see in the other something that needs to be preserved. For me, just calling somebody a human or a man or alive, and somehow this is supposed to evoke in me this feeling towards them. Yeah, I feel sad when I see a dog die, or a cat, or any animal. But I know what it is. I share in that creature's suffering at that moment because I project myself there. But I also know that if I save it from its fate, maybe I'm doing a far worse crime. Maybe I'm perpetuating a weakness that should be allowed to die. So we have all these men now who, now that women have been released from the bonds of paternalism, are excluded from the genetic pool. No, they don't turn to look at them. Women don't care about them. Women try to use them. They sense the weakness in them and try to manipulate them. Why would I care about these men? If they can't find a way to accomplish their goal, then fuck them. If on the other hand, they don't give a shit about women, like they claim, and they don't care about sex that much because they can jerk off, then why they're bitching about it? I've been doing this for years and I'm not complaining. And when the time came for me to produce a child because something happened in my life, I'm not going to go into it, I found a way to accomplish my goal with the least cost. And now I've returned to my previous state. I don't pay attention to women. I don't care about women, what they're doing, what they're saying. Why are these people trying to save men? Are they trying to save themselves, really? That's a question to ponder.